Listen, I think Scott Lang is one of the most underrated Avengers. Disagree? You try standing strong as a 65-foot tall man runs at you. However, he's far from invincible. Let's take a look at Ant-Man's biggest weaknesses that Kang the Conqueror will exploit in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. There's definitely some physical disadvantages when it comes to our favorite insect-themed hero. Yup, double check it, spiders aren't insects. That leaves Ant-Man. However, Scott Lang's greatest weaknesses lie on the inside. At his core, Scott is a loving father and caring man. He went to jail for exposing a corrupt corporation that was basically stealing money from its own customers. Then he proved that he would go to literal oblivion, what would later be fully explored as the quantum realm, to save his daughter. In many ways, his love for Cassie and the love he has developed for Hope is a great strength. It helps him keep fighting until his last breath and gives his avenging purpose. Unfortunately, that love Scott feels can also be severely used against him. And trust me, that's Kang's style to a T. Scott can have the people he cares about most very easily leveraged against him. It may even be Kang's plan to alter the deal and take Cassie from Scott so he can complete his heist. It's the typical Green Goblin holding a gondola of people in one hand and Mary Jane in the other situation. I'd be willing to wager Scott would betray every Avenger and even release the worst villain the MCU has ever seen in order to make sure that Cassie and Hope come out of any situation unharmed. As you'll see, the Ant-Man suit is a fine weapon, capable of incredible destruction, but for some reason it's still not as good as it could be. What was played off as a joke in Ant-Man and the Wasp becomes a very important question at this point in the MCU, and that question is, why on earth does the Ant-Man suit not have wings and blasters yet? Sure, the Wasp suit was purposefully given upgrades, but even Hank in another universe eventually gave his suit the ability to fly and shoot blasters, just like the Wasp suit. Now I get it, haha, it was real funny. Hope got all the good stuff because Scott's a goof. But at this point, we're putting this guy in real danger here, no? I mean, we've seen the quantum realm, those floors don't look too stable. All Kang's gotta do now is push Scott off a cliff, and because of the lack of upgrades, poof, that's it. Ant-Man becomes Splat-Man. I'm just saying, the tech exists. Maybe Scott should try pushing a little harder for it. You know, like how much harder I'm pushing to get you to hit that subscribe button and keep up with all the latest, greatest CBR content. On to the rest of the video. Kang comes from a time where the solution to any problem has likely already been invented. He has a suit that, assuming it follows along with the comics, has untold power with no side effects. Unfortunately, Scott can't say the same. The Ant-Man suit is an incredible piece of technology that gives the user power to stomp entire armies or infiltrate the most secure places. But it's far from perfect. We know that using the suit can have some serious side effects. Hank Pym once told us that he really can't be the Ant-Man anymore, because after wearing it for years, the suit took a toll on him. This also happened in an accelerated fashion when Darren Cross used his own version of the Yellow Jacket that also employed Pym particles. It caused him to completely lose his mind, nearly shoot his old mentor, turn a board member into goo, and kidnap a little girl. Plus, assuming the rumors are true and Darren Cross is the one who turned out to be MODOK in Quantumania, the dude's not looking so hot anymore. All of these things, the head deformation, the re-scrambling of one's brain chemistry, would give anyone pause for using the Ant-Man suit, and Scott has been doing it for years now. It's certainly possible that he may start to become hesitant. Granted, he's had nowhere as long of a career as Hank had, but still, if he wants to have a somewhat normal mind by the time he's a grandfather, he's really gonna have to start picking and choosing when he goes subatomic. Even though the suit is flawed, that thing is one of his greatest strengths. And what's one thing every comic book teaches you? No, besides the fact that Deadpool's feet look weird. That's right, every strength can also be a weakness. Scott's dependence on the suit to fight can put him in some precarious situations. In fact, it may even look like he will be in one when Kang the Conqueror effectively destroys his helmet. Without the suit, Scott is just a man. Now granted, he's an ex-con who was taught effectively how to fight by the Wasp, but he still would rank far below the rest of the Avengers without his size-changing abilities. It looks like Scott and Kang will be engaging in good old-fashioned fisticuffs, and Scott seems hopelessly outmatched. Luckily, this is a weakness of Kang's too, but if Scott is fighting anyone, their best hope is to render his suit inoperable and take him on just as a man, not an Ant-Man. A possible comic inaccuracy may be another downfall of Scott's when it comes to battling someone on the level of Kang the Conqueror. In the comics, Ant-Man is maybe the most undoubtedly powerful hero. The science of the suit and the Pym particles basically help turn him into an ant-sized wrecking ball. The way it's supposed to work is that the particle shrinks the distance between atoms, changing the size of an object without it losing any of its mass. We have seen this mostly in an explanation and sometimes in practice in the MCU. For example, the first time Scott falls from the tub when using the suit, he hits the the floor, cracks it, and turns out to be okay. In another instance, Hope tells Scott that his punches will have the impact of a fully grown man, basically turning his shrunken fist into a bullet. Unfortunately, this has not been consistent in the MCU, leading us to believe that one of Scott Lang's weaknesses is that Ant-Man, he's far too light. First off, his mass clearly changes when he grows. He wouldn't be able to stomp people if he was that large and still only weighed 200 pounds in total. Also, Scott is able to travel on the surface of people without them even noticing. Iron Man's armor didn't even register that a supposedly 200-pound ant-sized man snuck his way into its circuits. Essentially, without this extra punch, Kang could literally flick Ant-Man into space. Now, this next one is more psychological, and truthfully, it's totally speculative. Everyone knows Scott Lang did some time. His whole thing is that he's a reformed Robin Hood-like figure who had to pay for his cool crimes. This means that Scott spent a significant amount of time in prison for his burgling days. Now, it seems like he didn't have the worst time. He made some friends like Luis and Peachy, but with his daughter on the outside growing up without him, Scott has sworn never to return to prison. The psychological fear can drive a man to do some crazy things. I think subconsciously, Scott fears being imprisoned again, and may even see his time in the quantum realm when Thanos snapped half of the population out of existence, and the following 5 years after as somewhat of his second sentence. He missed his daughter's childhood, and then missed her grow into a young woman. It seems like Kang will be playing on this fear. He's offering him time, all the time he missed while being in prison. And the fact that Scott is willing to play ball with this madman shows how much he fears missing any more time from being imprisoned again. The mere threat of Kang doing this to Scott could be enough to make him do whatever the Master of Time wants. Scott's not your typical hero. He didn't volunteer for a science experiment to become a super soldier, and he didn't build a vast fortune making weapons, and then eventually turn those weapons into the ultimate hero. No, he was a criminal, and was recruited by Hank Pym for that exact reason. After all, he was expendable, but he proved to be a good-hearted man worthy of being called an Avenger. However, he didn't leave behind all of his past tendencies. You see, because of Scott's past, he has a certain ability to break the rules. Sometimes it turns out great. For example, he was told not to mess with the regulator. He did, and it helped him defeat Yellow Jacket, but he got very lucky that he happened to have a way out of being trapped in the quantum realm. He spent the majority of his sequel film evading house arrest and running from the police, only to barely make it back running through the streets of San Francisco in his underwear. However, I don't think he will always be this lucky. Kang knows that Scott doesn't play inside the lines. He would devise a plan knowing very well that Scott would try to find the most unique solution. But one day his luck will run out, and that's something I think Kang will rely on. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to Ant-Man's biggest weakness, spiders. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but who likes spiders? Which of Ant-Man's weaknesses will be his downfall in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania?